There is a name that has echoed through 3,000 years of human imagination. Spoken in temples, carved into shields, whispered by soldiers before battle as both curse and protection. Medusa. We think we know her. We have seen her rendered in marble, in oil paint, in the glowing frames of modern cinema. A writhing crown of serpents. A face so terrible it freezes the blood, turns living flesh to cold, indifferent stone. But knowledge, as the Greeks understood better than most, is a dangerous thing to assume. Because before the monster, there was a woman. And before the woman, there was something older still. To understand Medusa, we must first understand the world she came from. A world that existed before Zeus claimed his throne, before the Olympians reordered the heavens and the earth to suit their appetites. In the beginning, there were older powers, the Titans, the primordial forces, and beneath them, woven into the fabric of the earth itself, were the chthonic deities, gods of soil and sea and shadow who predated the bright, quarrelsome gods of Olympus by countless ages. Medusa belonged, in her earliest form, to this older world. Her name in ancient Greek means simply the guardian, the protectress, the ruler. Not monster, not abomination. Guardian. The Greeks gave Medusa a lineage that places her at the very edge of the known world, at the boundary between the mortal and the utterly unknowable. Her parents were Phorcys and Ceto, ancient sea deities associated with the hidden dangers of the deep. Her sisters were the Grey Ones, ancient crones who shared a single eye and a single tooth between them, and the other Gorgons, Stheno and Euryale, who were, unlike their sister, immortal. Only Medusa was mortal. Only Medusa could be killed. The Greeks embedded this vulnerability deliberately. Mortality was always the door through which tragedy entered, and tragedy, for Medusa, was already being written. In the version of the myth recorded by the Roman poet Ovid, drawing on far older Greek traditions, Medusa, before her transformation, was not fearsome. She was magnificent. Ovid writes that among all her attributes, it was her hair that men most admired, thick, lustrous, falling like dark water around a face of extraordinary beauty. She was, by every account available to us, a young woman of divine allure in a world where divine allure was both a blessing and a sentence. She had entered the service of Athena as a devoted priestess, dedicating herself to the goddess of wisdom and war, a life of celibacy, of ritual, of sacred purpose. It was a choice that should have kept her safe. It did not. Poseidon saw her. That is how the ancient sources record it, simply, terribly. The god of the sea and earthquakes, brother of Zeus himself, one of the supreme rulers of the cosmos, looked upon Medusa and was consumed by desire. What Poseidon wanted, Poseidon took. The ancient Greeks were under no illusion about this. Their gods were not moral paragons. They were power made divine, appetite made eternal. And so Poseidon violated Medusa within the sacred temple of Athena, in the very sanctuary she had pledged her life to protect. The details in the ancient sources are spare, clinical almost, but the horror they describe is absolute. A mortal woman, a god's will. The holy ground of her devotion turned into the scene of her destruction. And where was Athena during all of this? The goddess of wisdom and justice, protectress of her own sacred house. Where was she when her priestess cried out? The myth does not give us Athena's absence as mercy. It gives us her silence as judgment. Whether Athena was truly powerless against a brother Olympian, or whether she simply chose not to intervene, the ancient sources do not entirely agree. But what happens next is unambiguous. Athena punished Medusa, not Poseidon, who had committed the act, Medusa, who had suffered it. This is perhaps the most ancient and the most terrible truth embedded in this myth. The powerful protect each other, and the powerless bear the weight of what the powerful do. Athena transformed Medusa. The luminous hair that Ovid had praised became a mass of writhing serpents. The face of beauty became a visage of terror. The eyes, those human eyes that had witnessed violation in a holy place, were given a power that turned all who met their gaze to stone. Athena called it punishment, but read the transformation carefully, and another interpretation surfaces. Medusa was given the power to destroy any man who looked upon her. She was given armor made of her own suffering. She was made untouchable, unreachable, beyond the grasp of any man forever after. Whether Athena intended mercy or cruelty, and the Greeks themselves debated this, the result was a woman encased in her own impenetrable fortress of horror. She was cast out, beyond the reach of civilization, beyond the shores of the known world, to the far western edges of the ancient Greek imagination, a place the Greeks called the land beyond the setting sun, where the Hesperides tended their golden garden and Atlas held the sky upon his shoulders. Here, at the uttermost margin of the world, Medusa made her dwelling in a cave of gray stone, surrounded by the statues she had inadvertently created, men who had come seeking glory or curiosity or conquest, and who had found instead the cold permanence of their own ambition. The garden of stone figures grew, and in the midst of it, alone and terrible, Medusa waited, for what perhaps even she no longer knew. Perseus was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman named Danae, conceived, as so many of Zeus's children were, through an act of divine coercion. His grandfather Acrisius, king of Argos, had received a prophecy that his grandson would one day kill him, and so Danae had been imprisoned in a bronze chamber. Zeus visited her as a shower of gold. Perseus was born, and the machinery of fate ground forward. When the king of Seriphos desired Danae and sought a means to be rid of her troublesome son, he set Perseus the task he knew would end him: bring back the head of Medusa. It was, as the Greeks understood such things, a death sentence dressed as a quest. But fate, as always, had other intentions. The gods equipped him. This is the part of the myth that reveals how completely the divine powers of Olympus had decided Medusa must die. Hermes gave Perseus a curved adamantine sword, a blade that could cut what no mortal weapon could. Athena gave him her own polished shield of mirrored bronze. The Hesperides gifted him a leather satchel called the cabesus, specially made to contain the severed head without harm to the bearer. The nymphs provided winged sandals, and Hades himself contributed the cap of invisibility, the helm that had once swallowed him whole in shadow during the war against the Titans. An arsenal assembled by the most powerful forces in existence, all aimed at one woman, alone in a cave at the edge of the world. To find Medusa, Perseus first had to find her sisters, the Graeae, those ancient, gray-haired crones who had been old before memory began. 3 sisters, 1 eye, 1 tooth, passing these singular possessions between them in an endless ritual of shared, diminished sight. Perseus ambushed them in the gray half-light between night and dawn, snatching the eye as it passed between pale, groping hands. Their screams were ancient and hollow, the outrage of creatures who had survived everything and were now, absurdly, defeated by a young man's cunning. He would not return the eye, he told them, until they revealed the path to their sister. They told him, and he held out the eye, and they reached for it with trembling hands, and the path to Medusa opened before him like a wound. He came to her place at sunset, the world burning amber and blood-red behind him. He wore the helm of Hades and moved unseen, a shadow among shadows, and all around him the stone men watched with their frozen eyes. There were so many of them, warriors in full armor, their swords still half drawn, travelers with their provisions still strapped to their backs, frozen mid-step. Men whose last act had been to look upon something they could not have survived regardless, because what Medusa's gaze transformed was not merely flesh. It transformed the moment of encounter into something permanent, eternal, undeniable. They had seen her. They had been seen. And now they stood as monuments to the meeting of mortal ambition and ancient, unchosen power. She was sleeping. The ancient sources are specific about this. Perseus found Medusa in the hour of her sleep, the serpents of her hair temporarily stilled, her terrible face in a rare moment of mortal vulnerability. There is something devastating in this image, if we allow ourselves to feel it. This woman who had been violated, transformed, exiled, feared, hunted, even she needed sleep. Even the monster the gods had made of her required those hours of unconscious humanity. And Perseus approached with Athena's shield raised before him, watching only her reflection in the mirror-bright bronze. Never her directly, never her eyes. He navigated her existence by reflection, by a deliberately mediated image. He could only kill her by never truly seeing her. In that detail, an entire truth resides. He struck once. The adamantine blade, forged for this moment, guided by the reflected image in Athena's shield, fell across Medusa's neck with the finality that the gods had long decreed. The Gorgon did not scream. She did not curse him or reach for him. The ancient sources record what happened in the instant of the blow with an almost scientific detachment, as if the writers themselves were processing something that exceeded their capacity for grief. From the wound in Medusa's neck, two creatures were born. Chrysaor, the golden-sworded giant, stepped into existence, fully formed, and Pegasus, the winged horse, white as sea foam, beautiful beyond description, erupted from the blood and rose toward the open sky. Life from her ending, creation from her destruction. The gods are never simple in their mathematics. Perseus fled. The winged sandals carried him up and into the dark sky, as the immortal sisters, Stheno and Euryale, woke to the scent of their sister's death and rose in pursuit. Their grief was the grief of immortals, absolute, unconsolable, and expressed as pure, annihilating fury. They could not die, these sisters. They would grieve Medusa forever. Perseus, wearing the helm of Hades, was invisible to them, but not inaudible. The ancient poets describe the sound the Gorgon sisters made in their pursuit as the invention of the aulos, the reed flute that Athena later fashioned instruments to imitate the sound of immortal mourning. Even grief, in the Greek imagination, had the power to create beauty. Even the scream of loss could become music. As Perseus flew across Libya, Medusa's blood dripped from the satchel that contained her head. Where it fell on Libyan soil, serpents were born. And this, the Greeks explained, is why the deserts of North Africa are filled with dangerous snakes. It is mythology as natural history, as the ancient world's way of tracing the origin of the dangerous and the inexplicable back to a source grand enough to contain it. But there is something else in this detail. Medusa, even in death, was still creating. still transforming the world through her blood, her substance, her presence. The gods had made her a monster and then destroyed her, but her influence spread anyway, seeping into the earth of a continent, becoming part of the very landscape of the known world. Perseus used Medusa's head as a weapon 3 times before he finally surrendered it. He produced it before the Titan Atlas, and the ancient giant, who had defied Zeus and been condemned to bear the weight of the sky for eternity, was turned to stone. The Atlas Mountains of North Africa, the Greeks believed, were his body. Perseus used the head against the sea monster Cetus to save the princess Andromeda, chained to rocks as a sacrifice, a story that echoes Medusa's own in troubling ways, another woman offered up to the sea's appetite. And he used it against the king of Seriphos, the man who had sent him to his death, turning the court to stone in an act of justice that the Greeks thoroughly approved. Medusa's power outlasted Medusa. Her agency persisted beyond her ending. When Perseus had no further need of the head, he gave it to Athena. The goddess fixed it to the center of her aegis, her divine shield, the symbol of her protective and destructive power. And Medusa's face became the Gorgonian, the most potent apotropaic symbol in the ancient Greek world. Apotropaic, meaning that which turns evil away. The face that had been made monstrous to punish a woman for being victimized was now deployed by the very goddess who had punished her, as the ultimate protection against harm. The irony is almost too vast to comprehend. Medusa was made terrible as punishment. Then her terror was weaponized by the gods who made it. Then her image was used to protect, the very thing her name had always meant. Guardian, protectress, ruler. The centuries accumulated, and Medusa's story was told and retold, and each telling adjusted her a little further from what she had been. The Romans made her more explicitly monstrous and less explicitly wronged. The medieval world made her a symbol of sin and the dangers of female beauty. Renaissance artists made her face their canvas for exploring transgression and divine punishment. It was not until the modern era and the feminist classical scholars of the 20th century that readers began to ask the questions the myth had always contained. What does it mean that she was punished for being violated? What does it mean that the gods used her suffering as a weapon? What does it mean that her name meant guardian, and the world remembered her only as monster? These questions do not diminish the myth. They complete it. She endures. That is perhaps the final truth of Medusa, that no beheading, no transformation, no 3,000 years of being called a monster has erased her. Her face is still on shields and doors and thresholds across the Mediterranean world. Her story still demands to be told, still resists the simple interpretation, still contains within it something that will not be reduced to comfort. Before she was a monster, she was a guardian. Before she was a warning, she was a woman. And the oldest layer of her story, older than Perseus, older than Athena's curse, older than the serpents and the stone-gazed terror, tells of a powerful female deity of the ancient world, whose worship was old when Olympus was young. We have been calling her a monster for 3 millennia. Perhaps it is time to remember her name.